Hello everyone. Hope you're having a good day. As am I. I'm Bob, and today this is the big video I've been planning. I've been planning this video for 2 weeks. I had a draft of it for last week's predictions, but a thing I wanted to do on it didn't exactly work. So unfortunately, I had to scrap that and move all the predictions to this week's games. So yeah, this first up, I want to say the style of the video is inspired by ATP Overwatch, who does a lot of Overwatch League content. He does Overwatch news and Overwatch game predictions. It's a great channel for if you're an Overwatch League fan. So I'd 100% recommend checking him out if you haven't already. He has about 20k subs and is just straight up my inspiration for Overwatch League content. So yeah, with that being said, let's just move straight into the games. Okay. So for our first game, we got the Dallas Fuel taking on the Philadelphia Fusion. So the Dallas Fuel have been pretty inconsistent this season. It feels like Decay has been doing most of the work on the team, while the rest of the team has just been kind of going with what he does. Sometimes to good effect, most of the time to not. But the Philadelphia Fusion are doing it right. They have a star DPS player, Carpe, but they're not letting Carpe completely run the show and just following what he does. Everyone on that team, on the Philly Fusion, all have their own part and their own place in said team. So they all work together like a well-oiled machine and are just the Dallas Fuel doing the Dallas Fuel better. So overall, I'm going to have to give the Philly Fusion 3-0 this game against the Dallas Fuel. Okay, moving on, we have the LA Valiant versus the Houston Outlaws. So these two teams, if you asked me before last week, I would have said these two teams were very, very close in skill level, almost neck and neck with how they play and how they work. But overall, with the meta we're in right now, with a Genji composition mostly dominating, along with Houston unfortunately losing to the Washington Justice, which is just frankly embarrassing, because we know when Houston are in a bad meta from the start of the season, we know that they are going to struggle a lot, even at the start of the season being called the second last place team because of the meta that we were in. So overall, I'm going to give just a 3-2 to the LA Valiant, because I still feel the Houston Outlaws can pull out a couple maps in this series. Okay, so moving on now to the APAC games in the morning, we have the Seoul Dynasty taking on the Guangzhou Charge. Now, if you asked me this question, right, Seoul Dynasty or Guangzhou Charge, straight away I'd have to say Guangzhou Charge, because the Guangzhou Charge are just a more consistent team than the Seoul Dynasty, because the Seoul Dynasty and Chengdu, I'd say Seoul Dynasty and Chengdu are the two most inconsistent teams. One week they could rival Shanghai, the next they could probably lose to Boston. So overall, I'm going to have to give this a 3-1 to Guangzhou Charge, and this is assuming that 1 point comes from Seoul not botting out that game and just completely and utterly failing. So after that game, then we have the London Spitfire taking on the Hangzhou Spark. So this game, again, can be decently close depending on what way you look at it, but overall, I do feel it's Spark favored because of the DPS line on Spark. This meta kind of really suits them. So overall, I'm going to give this a 3-1 to the Spark, and they need a game to get back on track after their loss to the Chengdu Hunters, and the Seoul Dynasty also need the same thing. Okay, so now we have the NYXL taking on the Shanghai Dragons. So this is just unfair. Honestly, I'm giving this a 3-0 to the Dragons. New York haven't been looking too good, especially after their loss to Chengdu and their other losses as of recent. Even though they have beaten, I'm pretty sure that they beat the Guangzhou Charge in that game, which is impressive. However, I still feel the Dragons are the more consistent team and are probably going to end up doing better in this meta. So overall, I'm giving this a 3-0 to the Dragons. So then we have day 2 of the NA games. So starting us off, we have the Paris Eternal, we're cutting English there for a second, taking on the Washington Justice. So I'm just going to say this straight up. This is a 3-0 to to Paris. This is a 3-0 to Washington. I will literally print out this script and put it in a blender and drink it. But basically, Washington, yes, they beat Houston, but then again, this is an off-meta week for Houston, and so was last week. So overall, I'd say that doesn't change much about Washington. So I have to still give this a 3-0 to Paris, and Paris are such a better team than Washington at this moment, so much that the Washington head coach doesn't actually believe too much in his players, which he said in a tweet earlier. Well, he didn't word it exactly like that, but you can look at the tweet if you want. I'll try and drop his in the comment section if I can find it. Okay, so now moving on, we have the battle for Canada. I think part 3 this year, something like that. But we have Vancouver Titans taking on the Toronto Defiant. So straight up, these two teams. If you asked me this last year Vancouver 3-0 easy. But since all the controversy with Vancouver this year, I'm gonna have to give this as a 3-1 to the Toronto Defiant because of the skill differential and the Genji meta really suiting the Toronto DPS and not so much the Vancouver Titans. I mean, they can play it decently well, but it wouldn't be their best meta unlike it would be for Toronto. Okay, so moving on from that now, we have the Houston Outlaws taking on the San Francisco Shock. Now, these two teams there is such a skill gap. It's actually unreal because first up, Super Genji is OP. Okay, if they play Teo this game, I honestly wouldn't be surprised. But I just have a feeling that they're going to keep staying with Super Genji because it's been working out for them amazingly in the 2 games. Then again, they were against teams like Boston and Vancouver, so not necessarily the best teams in the world, but it's still working consistently, decently. So I'd say they're going to run that, and with just the entire Shock roster in general being such an amazing team, I'm going to have to give this as an easy 3-0 for the Shock. And then for another NA game we have the Dallas Fuel taking on the Atlanta Reign. So straight up, if this was even, like both of them only had to prepare for this one game, I would have had to spend a bit longer on this video to make a full decision. But overall, since Dallas have to prepare for 2 games and Atlanta only have to prepare for 1, I'm going to give this a 3-1 to Atlanta overall, as I think the meta also suits their DPS well as it does Decay. It suits Decay a lot as well. However, the entire Atlanta team would be stronger, like as a unit, than the Dallas Fuel would be as a unit. So then for our second last game, we have the LA Gladiators taking on the Florida Mayhem. So the Gladiators haven't been looking too good recently. They've been losing a couple games that they probably shouldn't have lost and dropping maps to teams they shouldn't have dropped. And Florida have been looking good. They peaked at the May Melee, but that doesn't mean that they've gotten bad. It's just that they've gotten slightly worse. But I'm still going to give this as a 3-0 to Florida because I believe that they can do this. And so for our last game, we have the Philadelphia Fusion taking on the LA Valiant. So straight up, again, I'm going to have to give this a 3-0 to Philly because the Valiant are a team that feel like the Valiant's little brother to me. Like, they're like a slightly worse Valiant that the Valiant likes. It's like a slightly worse Valiant. They're a slightly worse Philadelphia Fusion that they like to pick on. So I'm going to have to give this as just a straight up 3-0. However, I do believe there is a possibility that the Valiant take 1 map off them. So this could be 3-0 or 3-1, depending on what way the Valiant come out. So yes, that was today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I did make a couple slip-ups during the audio because this is my first time reading off a script. Yeah, I had a script for this video. It wasn't pure, like, line to line what I wanted to say. It was just a general guide for what I should say. But if you guys enjoyed this, make sure you like and subscribe. And I'll catch you all in my next video, possibly an Apex video or a montage video.